Get this, adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Wondery. Greenlight.com/Wondery.
Bombas makes the most comfortable socks, underwear, and T-shirts.
Warning, Bombas are so absurdly comfortable you may throw out all your other clothes.
Sorry, do we legally have to say that?
No, this is just how I talk, and I really love my Bombas.
They do feel that good. And they do good, too. One item purchased equals one item donated.
To feel good and do good, go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY at checkout.
The Prosecutors is brought to you by Progressive, where drivers who save by switching save over $700 on average. Quote now at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National annual average insurance savings by new customers surveyed who save with Progressive between June 2020 and May 2021. Potential savings will vary.
I'm Jamie Beebe.
And I'm Jake Deptula. We're the host of the Strictly Stalking podcast.
Strictly Stalking is a true crime podcast that explores stalking stories told by the survivors in their own words.
Join us every Tuesday as we interview survivors, advocates, and experts to give you a deep dive into the workings of a stalking case.
Would you know where to turn if you or someone you know is being stalked? We'll also give you the resources to fight back, know your rights, and get justice.
Find Strictly Stalking wherever you listen to podcasts from Podcast One.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on the Prosecutors, a woman attends an adult slumber party and ends up dead in the backyard. Did she fall, or was she pushed? Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, by my grand co-host, Alice.
Hi, Brett. It's so good to be back with you. And, as you were saying grand, I had, the world's biggest yawn. Which
was it a grand yawn?
It was a grand yawn, but I think it just encapsulates this phase of life. Both of us had, weeks of sick children. I think it's the changing weather. Who knows what it is, but it's just grand to be with you is all. Even if I'm tired, I love recording with you.
Oh, well, it's good to be with you too, Alice. And it feels like it's been a while because you've been traveling around the country and I've been sick, and between the two of them, we haven't got to record. So I'm glad to be back with you.
It's been 1 week. I just want to put it out there. It's been 1 week, but I appreciate
it feels
that
like
1
longer.
week feels like a long time.
Much longer. Long time. An eternity. An eternity.
Indeed.
And I have to say, I'm always sad. This is always a sad episode for me because it's the first episode after October. I hope everyone had a happy Halloween. I mean, as I record this, it's still October, so it's kind of a weird sadness, but it's always sad when we stop doing the October episodes and we move on. But we do have a really great case for you. But nevertheless, I hope everybody had a good holiday.
I'm sorry, you have a preemptive sadness?
It's a preemptive sadness. I have to live in the future when I'm doing the podcast. So,
my gosh.
Weird.
Must I remind you that we do horror every single day on this podcast?
I know. As I pointed out to you back when you were scared of the October episodes, hopefully this doesn't mean you're going to be scared of all the episodes going forward.
Oh, I am scared of all the episodes. I don't know if I'm the only one of our listeners, because I listen to our episodes as well. I don't listen to them at night when I'm by myself. Or when I listen to them, and if I'm on a walk or on a run or something, I actually don't put in my noise-canceling headphones because I'm I need to hear what's around me.
It always surprises me, the people who say they listen to the podcast to go to sleep, because I'm just how does that... I mean, I get that we have soothing dulcet tones that make you drift off into slumber. I get that. But nevertheless, I don't really know how. I don't think I could go to sleep listening to some of the stuff we talk about. But to each his own. We're not complaining. Whenever you listen to us, we're happy. If it's background noise, annoying noise, whatever it is you need, we are here to provide it. And today, we do have a really interesting case that has been requested many, many, many times. And this is a heavily requested case. And it's a weird one. And it's one of those where we're going to be looking at, is there a crime here? With Ellen Greenberg, we did a month or so ago. The question was, is it suicide or is it murder? And in this case, the case of Tamla Horsford, the question we're going to be asking is, was her death, her tragic death, the result of an accident, or was it murder, manslaughter, some sort of crime? Was some sort of crime committed here? And the question that goes along with that, was there a cover-up? So we're really interested to dive into this. Can't wait to hear what you guys think, but we will go ahead and tell you the story that we're going to be covering today in case you're not familiar with this one.
So Tamla Horsford was a busy person. She was the mother of 5 boys, having already raised a daughter who was out of the house. In addition to chasing her boys around the football field, she and her husband were excited about the future. Tamla's daughter was expecting her first child. They were going to be grandparents.
And I don't want to stop you here, Alice, but I can just say, as the father of one boy, knowing that you are the mother of 2, I don't know how you do this. When I read that the first time, that she had 5 boys, I just thought, bless her. I don't know how you handle that.
But also, I think it shows you, she's an energetic person. It takes a lot of energy to keep up with 5 active boys who play sports. And so it's almost impossible to be a recluse when you have 5 boys who are involved in sports and team sports at that. So I think this is already painting a picture of who Tamla is. Very involved in her boys' lives, very involved in the community, or at least someone who's out in the community. She sees other people all the time. And so therefore, it's really not a surprise that in November of 2018, when she was about to celebrate a birthday, her friends invited her over for an adult sleepover at one of her friends' houses. There would be food, football, irreverent board games, all the great things of adult sleepovers. And of course, drinking. Lots of drinking. It was all in good fun, and no one should have gotten hurt. But when the group awoke on November 4th, 2018, they discovered a horrifying scene. Tamla was lying dead, face down in the backyard. Was it an accident or something more sinister?
And this is one of those just feels inexplicable. There's no reason this should have happened. This is not the kind of setting that would lead to death in anything other than a Murder, She Wrote episode. Angela Lansbury, may she rest in peace. But she was great. And it's an aside, but she was great. But nevertheless, you have it here. And this is actually almost the perfect setup for something like that. You have this sleepover where you have all these people coming together in one place. And all of a sudden, somebody ends up dead.
Brett, before we move on there's a kind of important piece here that we haven't noted, because so far you're like, okay, birthday party, it's kind of like mom's night out sort of thing, but mom's night in. This takes place in a suburb of Atlanta called Cumming, Georgia. And those of you who are familiar with Cumming, or kind of the broader, greater suburb of Atlanta, this is not Atlanta City at all. This is as suburb as it gets. Actually, my dad lives in Cumming, so I go there a lot. It is, your kind of big, sprawling houses and neighborhoods, good school district. I think the Forsyth School District is, one of the best in Georgia and maybe in the nation as well. And people move there to raise their families, to live near Costco's and, the other great grocery stores type places that I know I like to live next to, so that they can raise their families but maybe work in Atlanta. So we're not talking about the inner city or downtown where there's a lot of bars accessible. This is the suburbs.
Yeah, it's one of those places where things like this don't happen, which of course is what they say right before they tell you that something like this did happen there. But this is a shocking event for everybody, right? You don't have an adult sleepover, and somebody ends up dead in the backyard. That's just not something that happens. But in this case, it did. And obviously, you can imagine a lot of people wondered why this happened. And it wasn't long, as we're going to discuss, that the police decided this was some sort of accident. And that was something that Tamla's family just didn't accept. I don't know if they couldn't accept it, but they didn't accept it. And they didn't accept it because there were just a lot of questions about the investigation, about the people involved, about the scene, things we're going to go over as we discuss this. There are a few things to talk about at the beginning. And, you know, it's interesting when you do a show like this, you think about how you want to present things and in what order, because the order in which you present things can skew people's perspective. You know, if you load up the front end with a bunch of evidence of one thing, a lot of people will go ahead and make up their mind. And even when you come back with other evidence, it's hard to get them out of that position. And so you always wonder, like, how do you want to proceed? But I think there's one thing about this case that we just have to say at the very beginning, because it is something that is sort of hung over this case, and that's sort of the racial aspect. So this is a group of people who've come together to celebrate this birthday party. Tamla is black. Everyone else who's there is white, with the exception of the birthday girl, who we're going to talk about in a second, her boyfriend, who is Hispanic. In Georgia, incoming Georgia, in Forsyth County, where this is taking place, there's obviously a lot of sort of long-standing racial tensions. It's hard to find anywhere in the South where, if you go back 100 years, there are some pretty bad things that happened. And even earlier than that, as you sort of go through the civil rights movement and into the 70s, there's some really sort of unfortunate occurrences. And that has sort of hung over this case. And it's made people wonder, is there a racial aspect to this? And one thing that's definitely true, we might not even know about this case were it not for that racial aspect, because it kind of went under the radar until George Floyd was killed, and there was a movement to examine a lot of cases like this. And actually, a lot of celebrities heard about this case and thought this case needs to be reexamined. And that's one of the reasons it was reexamined. We'll talk about some of those racial aspects as we go through and whether we think they really play any role in here. But just something to remember as we go through the timeline in this case. So this is going to take us back to 2018. November 3rd, 2018, right around when this episode will come out. At about 7 p.m., Tamla prepares a breakfast casserole for her family. A mother of 5 boys and 1 daughter who is out of the house. Cooking probably takes up a significant part of her time, and this is just the reason we even point this out. This is sort of indicative of the person we have here. She's going to a party, and what is she doing? She's making sure that her family has food to eat and is taken care of. And that's the kind of person she is. And I think that also kind of informs how we look at what happened in the hours afterwards. Okay, so around 8:30 p.m., Tamla arrives at Jan Meyer's house. Now, Jan's name is spelled like Jean. It's Geanne, but I've heard it pronounced Jan, including in a 911 call we're going to listen to. So that's what I'm going with. If it's wrong, forgive me. It's Jan's 45th birthday, and she's decided to have her friends over rather than go out, like Alice was saying, into the bars, into town, and party there. We're not going to do that. We're not going to have people getting on the road and in danger and everything else. Not going to have to worry about designated drivers. They're just going to come over to her house, drink as much as they want, party as much as they want. If they want to stay, they can sleep over. If somebody wants to come get them, they can do that as well. So the women knew each other through their son's Pop Warner football league. As we said, Tamla's boys played football. They'd all met through that. And so that's how they know each other. Now, obviously, they didn't know Tamla well, but obviously she was somebody who got invited to this party. Sometimes this story is presented as almost she's an outsider. And I think part of that has to do with her race. But just to me, if she got invited, that says something. It says that they're at least close enough that Jan wants to have her over for this significant event and have her stay at her house. I don't invite people I don't like over to my house. And I don't really invite people I don't know well over to my house, especially to spend the night. So I think that's interesting. That sort of relationship, honestly, with the 4 years that followed and everything that happened, it's hard to know exactly what their relationship was in the beginning. Now, different people say different things, but nevertheless, the fact that she was invited over, to me, is significant.
And I think that's fair to say because obviously the football league has more people than our invited, the parents, right? And so this is kind of a subset of that league. And you don't have to be friends with everyone that's on your kids' team. You know, my son plays soccer. There are some that I get along better with and we hang out. And so this is a pretty big group of women, but it's certainly not everyone. So I think you make a good point there, Brett, that, you know, they see each other a lot because they're, you know, lots of practices. You spend a lot of time on the sidelines, going to games, and you kind of naturally form friendships, but no one's forcing you to be friends. And here, I think they just all get along.
And there are going to be 8 women at this party. And as Alice said, it takes more than 8 people to play football. So there would have been some other women who had some boys on those football teams who either didn't get invited or chose not to go. So I think that is significant. In any event, Tamla does come. She brings some clothes, and she brings a bottle of tequila that she bought for Jan in Mexico. Now, what she doesn't realize is that Jan doesn't actually drink tequila. She's more of a vodka person. A lot of you out there fully understand that position, which means there is more for everyone, though in the end, it will be Tamla who ends up drinking most of the tequila that is consumed that night. As I said, the group consists of 8 women, including Tamla, and 2 men, Jose Barrera, who is Jan's boyfriend, and Tom Smith, who is one of the women's husbands. Jan's live-in aunt, Madeline, is also present and lives there with Jan. So that's sort of the people who are in the house. Now, originally, as we said, it was supposed to be all women. These guys come over. Initially, they're kind of in the basement and the women are upstairs. The groups will sort of combine eventually. But in any event, when Tamla arrives, the other ladies are watching the LSU-Alabama football game. Jan is an LSU fan. LSU will lose to Alabama that day, 29-0. I remember that game well. It is LSU's 8th straight loss to Alabama, though they would get their revenge the next year when they would beat Alabama on their way to the national championship.
None of this has anything to do with the story, except Brett really wants to harp on the fact that Alabama beat LSU.
I'm just
I
noting,
just want to point that out.
In a way, it actually does affect the night because they're going to watch the game, and the game, LSU played so poorly that they end up sort of forgoing the game. And the guys who are watching it downstairs come upstairs, and they decide we're just going to, turn this game off and play some other games, some board games and that kind of stuff. So, Alice, it does have some significance that LSU was crushed by Alabama that night. So Tamla starts her night off with a shot of Fireball, and then she decides to open her tequila, and she is going to drink tequila for the rest of the night.
And before we go on, it's important to describe the layout of the home. And this is what we have from the police report. They wrote, the residence itself is a multi-story single-family dwelling. It is built on a basement with a main floor and an upstairs. The basement level is finished. Entry into the residence is made through a front door on the front of the residence. Additionally, an attached garage is on the front of the residence with a single overhead door. The backyard is contained within a 6-foot privacy fence. It is accessible through gates on either side of the residence. On the back of the residence, there's a large patio on the main level with a covered area underneath. And note, because there is a basement, and this is a very typical house in Cumming, because that big patio is on the main floor, there's a basement underneath it. So it's actually not level with the ground or the yard. It's about, 10, 12 feet up in the air. So from the back of the residence, it's accessible with a ground level door and a set of stairs leading up to that main level patio we were just talking about, where there's another door leading into the main level of the residence. So if this is confusing, basically off the main part of the house, which is actually the middle floor, because there's a basement, main floor, and then upstairs. If you come in the main floor, when you go out, there's a big patio deck, and it is big. I mean, it fits like 3 ceiling fans. It basically spans the whole length of the house. It's nearly 15 feet off the ground, and this patio was accessible from the kitchen area. We'll have some pictures of this up on the website and also on YouTube if that's where you're listening to us, so you can see it. But it's really nice, and you'll see the houses around it basically have the same structure. These are kind of like cookie cutter homes. You know, they're really nice homes, but usually you'll have a builder come through and build kind of the same idea. A lot of good outdoor space that still has covering because it's hot in Georgia in the summers, but in the winter and fall can really cool down, and you can have some beautiful nights out there for dinner, watching football, just like this night.
At times you'll hear this party described as it was going to be this big slumber party and everybody was spending the night, but that doesn't seem to actually be true. And in fact, by 10:30, two of the women have already left to relieve their babysitters. And look, I don't think any of this is surprising. We're all adults. If you go to an adult party, there's some people who can stay late and there's some people who can't. These two ladies obviously could not. And the rest of the group, they continued to drink. They continued to play games. By midnight, they are playing Cards Against Humanity. Apparently, they played for about an hour. At this point, some of the other party goers are getting ready to go home. So people start to clean up and get ready to leave or go to bed. Tamla doesn't really want the night to end. Now, at this point, there are people who will later describe her as engaging and friendly and not overly intoxicated. This is going to be something we're going to talk about multiple times. We'll just leave it there for now. We'll come back to it. But the initial reports from people are, yeah, she'd been drinking, but she didn't seem like she was particularly drunk. At some point during the night, she actually FaceTimes with her husband and sons and tells them good night. That was actually well before midnight, but nevertheless, she's had this conversation with them. So they have now, some women are starting to leave. At 1:39 and 1:40, the garage door is opened and closed a couple times. It's actually open and closed and open and closed. I mean, people presumably are going in, going out. The last time it is opened, it is not fully closed, so it remains opened. Now, we know this, of course, because there's a system that's recording, a security system that's recording when doors open and close. Why is it not fully closed? Did someone not close it all the way? Did they leave it all the way open? Did something prevent the sensor from being tripped? Hard to say, but nevertheless, it was never fully closed. At 1:47 a.m., Bridget Fuller's husband picks up Bridget from the party. Bridget sees Tamla eating a bowl of gumbo. Tamla tells Bridget she's going to have one more cigarette and go to bed. Tamla was a smoker, and she'd been going out throughout the night smoking cigarettes on the patio. She tells her she's probably going to sleep on the couch. Bridget says that Tamla walks her to the door, though her husband doesn't remember seeing her. Tamla's autopsy will reveal partially digested food in her stomach, though it's unclear what it is, and the autopsy does not describe it specifically. So at 1:49 a.m., the back door to the patio opens. So we talked about this before. This is the patio deck that is off the main floor. That door opens. It opens 2 minutes after Bridget Fuller leaves and after Tamla tells her she's going to have one more cigarette. At 1:50, the back door closes. At 1:57, the back door opens again. It is never closed after this. It remains open the rest of the night.
So at 4:10 a.m., the first woman to leave that morning does so as she has to go to work. That's commitment, by the way, staying at a party all night and then waking up at 4 a.m. to go to work. But that's what she does. And so she's the first one to leave, and no one else is really awake. At 7:45 a.m., another woman leaves the party. At 8:30 a.m., two more of the guests leave, including Tom Smith, who is one of the other men at the party. At 8:45 a.m., Jan Myers' aunt notices that the door is open. And when she looks outside, she sees Tamla laying in the grass below. It was obvious to her that Tamla was not alive, so she said a prayer and then went to get Jan. At 8:59 a.m., Jan calls 911. So note that's 14 minutes after Jan's aunt sees the door open and notices that Tam was outside. At 9:07 a.m., just 8 minutes later, the first officer arrives on the scene.
So obviously this is shocking for everyone. As we said before, how does a slumber party turn into someone dead in the backyard? And that's the question we're going to try and answer as we go through with this. The police show up. They do some investigation. Most people think the investigation wasn't great. And I think the reason for that is the investigators concluded fairly quickly this was some sort of accident due to misadventure, essentially. They come in It's kind of like the Ellen Greenberg case. They come in and they basically say, okay, so somebody was drinking a lot. They went out to smoke. You find them dead on the grass. Somehow, we don't know how, they stumbled over the railing and fell to their death, is essentially what they think happened. The initial officer actually thinks somehow she falls from ground level. He initially thinks that she was on the ground level and tripped and fell. But the autopsy will later confirm that no, that wouldn't have done the damage that she suffered, so she must have fallen from a higher level. But in any event, nobody's thinking murder here. Nobody's thinking this is a crime. They're all thinking it's an accident. So I will just go ahead and tell you a lot of the things you would like to have, we don't have. You don't have as many photographs of the scene as you would like. You don't have as many photographs of the body as you would like. You don't have as much, maybe, detail in the investigation as you would like. And like so many cases we talk about, a lot of times the mystery is as much from what you just don't know and can't know as any of the actual facts in the case. And that's sort of what we are dealing with here. But in any event, this investigation continues. Move forward to December of 2018. So we talked about Barrera earlier. He is Jan's boyfriend. He is also a pretrial officer for the Forsyth County court system, which means that he has access to the system that contains all the information on various open cases. That is one of the things you have if you work in the court system. And he stupidly decides to use that access to look up information on Tamla's case and sort of see how the investigation is going. When this is discovered, he is put on leave, and he is actually eventually terminated due to this incident.
And the reason Brett says that it was stupid of him to do this, because even though he has access to all of the cases, he is supposed to only be using this system, this database, for his work. So it's kind of too tedious for the system to grant access to each individual case for every pretrial officer for the case they're working on, because they often work on so many cases, the cases change, and also they can take over for each other, that it makes sense efficiency-wise for everyone just to have access to the database. But you're not supposed to be, for example, doing background checks on your potential daughter's boyfriend, or in this case, the investigation of a friend's death. And so that's why Brett said it was not smart of him to do that, because you're not allowed to do this sort of thing. And there's probably something within his employment contract that says, you only use this database for your work purposes.
And let me just say, when you listen to coverage of this case, this fact is often presented as really significant. Like, oh my goodness, clearly he must have had something to do with it. Something must have happened if he's accessing the database. And maybe he did, but I'll just tell you, this is one of the pitfalls and one of the things you have to look out for if you're working in a position where you have access to a lot of information. What Alice just used as an example, she didn't just pull out of the air. I mean, that's the kind of thing that happens all the time, that officers are getting in trouble for running background checks on their daughter's boyfriend, right? I mean, that stuff happens all the time, and it's really easy to forget. You can't just willy-nilly do that. It has to be for a law enforcement purpose, and if you're not doing it for a law enforcement purpose, then you are going to get in trouble. So, not saying this isn't significant, but he's not the first person to do it. A lot of people do this. A lot of people let curiosity get the better of them and make a really stupid choice. He clearly did that here, whether or not he had anything to do with Tamla's death or not. So on February 6, 2019, Forsyth County receives the final medical report, and at this point, based on that and the rest of their investigation, they declare the death an accident. So that's 2019. Fast forward all the way to July 2020. So as we said, 2019 happens, it kind of falls under the radar, but then you have a lot of focus on the deaths of African Americans, on whether or not the police are really investigating these, on whether or not there are cover-ups, on whether or not there's some sort of crime going on here. And people look at this case and they think, black lady dies at a party with a bunch of white people, frankly, and the police say it's an accident. Maybe we should look at this a little bit more. And one article I read said something along the lines of, if there had been a white person at a party with a bunch of black people and that person ended up dead, the police would have done a lot more investigation. And whether that's true or not, you can see why people felt that way, and they wanted to have more of an investigation than had happen. So at this point, Forsyth County, who is getting a lot of blowback, they asked the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the GBI, to conduct an independent investigation. And I will tell you, the GBI, very well respected. Most states have a Bureau of Investigation. The GBI is one that is really well respected, sort of around the country. And they will often be asked to weigh in on cases that don't even involve Georgia. So definitely a good person to have come in. In July of 2021, July 28th, actually, so a year later, the GBI concludes that there is no evidence to support criminal charges in the case.
So there's a lot there. So far, and I think this is exactly right, Brett. I mean, it's a really tragic thing, you know, a fun mom's night out. Gosh, I've had so many of these. To end in such a devastating way is gripping, especially when all around you, you see that these are like working moms and maybe dads. I don't know about the dads, but like we have women leaving at 4 a.m. We have them leaving at 10:30 the night before to take care of their kids, to go to work. This is not like a group of ladies who go bar hopping all the time, right? They're here to have a good time, celebrate their friend, but there's also, they're in the prime of life where a lot of people depend on them, whether it's their children or their jobs. And that is the same for Tamla. And I think that's important to note here because it is so gripping because of who Tamla is. A 40-year-old woman with 6 children who's very involved in her community.
And obviously, we're going to talk about a lot of stuff in this case, things people think are important, evidence that may or may not be significant. But one thing I think you will have noticed from the timeline, there is nothing in the timeline before Tamla dies that is unusual. So nobody has a fight. There's no sense that anybody's angry at each other. There's nothing unusual at all, really. I mean, there's nothing in the timeline that we read to you up until the point where she's eating gumbo and the lady leaves. There is nothing that happens up to that point that would give you any indication that something like this is going to happen. And obviously, there are some people who think that the reason for that is because the only people who would know are the people who were there, and that the people who were there have entered into sort of a conspiracy of silence, and they have decided we are going to stick together on this, and we're not going to tell the truth. We're not going to tell the true story of what happened that night. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. But based on the story that we've heard up to this point, there is no indication that this is going to happen. And then all of a sudden it does. It's just so striking. And it is one of those things that it feels so insane that this could happen that you naturally, there is a natural inclination that there has to be more to this. There has to be something more. And like I said, we're going to look at the things that make people think maybe there is more to it. But I think the first thing we should do is listen to the 911 call in this case. The Prosecutors is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Most of you listening right now are probably multitasking. Yep, while you're listening to us, you're probably also driving, cleaning, exercising, or maybe even grocery shopping. But if you're not in some kind of moving vehicle, there's something else you can be doing right now. Getting an auto quote from Progressive Insurance. It's easy and you could save money by doing it right from your phone. Drivers who save by switching to Progressive save over $700 on average, and auto customers qualify for an average of 7 discounts. Discounts for having multiple vehicles on your policy, being a homeowner, and more. So just like your favorite podcast, Progressive will be with you 24/7, 365 days a year, so you're protected no matter what.
Multitask right now. Quote your car insurance at Progressive.com to join the over 27 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National annual average insurance savings by new customer surveys who saved with Progressive between June 2020 and May 2021. Potential savings will vary. Discounts not available in all states and situations.
Alice, you know how some things are just your happy place, and when you get to do them, they just make you feel better? Well, that's the way I feel about June's Journey. You guys know I love June's Journey. I've told you about it a lot, and I want you to take part in it as well. And it is perfect for you if you are a fan of this podcast, because I'm going to go out on a limb and say you like solving mysteries. And if you never get tired of a good whodunit, then you'll love June's journey. You play as June Parker, an amateur detective, on a quest to solve the murder of her sister and uncover her family's many secrets. You'll need to find objects devilishly hidden in intricate scenes full of little details before the timer runs out. A variety of game modes and puzzles await, and you will enjoy it. Just sit back, relax, and let your inner Sherlock escape to the glamorous, roaring 20s. And with new chapters every week, there will always be a new case waiting to be cracked.
June's Journey has tons of fun and unique features to keep you entertained. Chat and play with or against other players by joining a detective club. You'll even get the chance to play in a detective league to put your skills to the test. Help June relive some of her fondest memories with the new memoir feature and piece together her past to complete gorgeous albums and unlock exclusive awards like Island Beautifications. Find your inner detective. Download June's Journey today. Available on Android and iOS mobile devices, as well as on PC through Facebook Games. Brett, we've got a very different kind of sponsor for this episode, The Jordan Harbinger Show, which is a podcast you really should be listening to. And I know that every day somebody tells you that you just have to listen to some podcast and you nod and say, sure, and then you never listen to it. Don't let that happen here. Jordan's show, which Apple named one of its best of 2018, is aimed at making you a better informed, more critical thinker so you can get a sense of how the world actually works and come to your own conclusions about what's happening, even inside your own brain. Each episode is a conversation with a different fascinating guest, and I think you guys are going to love his true crime starter pack. You can learn everything about the secret life of an American art forger to life in the crack lane with Rick Ross.
Guys, the Jordan Harbinger Show, it's a different kind of podcast, and it's one that is focused on pulling useful, practical insights out of Jordan's brilliant guests. And we're not talking about pop psychology or wishy-washy self-help stuff here. The episodes are loaded with bits of wisdom that you can use to legitimately change your mind and improve your life right away. So what are you waiting for? We really enjoy this show, and we think you will as well. Search for The Jordan Harbinger Show. That's Harb as in boy, IN as in Nancy, GER on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Alice, you know, if there's one thing I love, it's meat. I love eating meat. I'm often doing keto. And if I can get high quality meat at a good price, that is amazing to me. And that's where ButcherBox comes in. ButcherBox takes the guesswork out of finding high quality meat and seafood that you can trust. This is 100% grass-fed beef. It's free-range organic chicken, pork raised crate free, and wild caught seafood. And you can get just what you want delivered right to your doorstep. This is free shipping for the continental United States, no surprise fees, and you can choose from a variety of box plan options from curated to customized and change your plan whenever you want.
Brett, you know, the cost of meat has really been skyrocketing at the grocery store, which is why I love my ButcherBox high quality range of cuts, because these cuts are hard to come by at the store, but they're also at an amazing value. And we always talk about how busy we are being full-time lawyers and full-time podcasters. Having these meats delivered to my door is amazing. Yesterday, the temperature had dropped. It was a beautiful fall evening, and I pulled out ribeye steaks from my ButcherBox delivery, and I cooked them up on the stove, and my family just went crazy for it. They were so juicy, they were so tender, and they were full of flavor in a way that only the best high-quality meats can have. And now with the holidays coming up, we know that the main course for Thanksgiving dinner can sometimes be a main source of stress. Not anymore. ButcherBox is offering our listeners free turkey with their first order. Sign up today at butcherbox.com/prosecute and use code prosecute to get one 10 to 14 pound turkey free in your first box. That's butcherbox.com/prosecute and use code prosecute to claim this deal.
This is the 911 call that was made that morning. It's about 5 minutes long, so bear with us. I know some of you guys hate 911 calls, but I think it's always important to listen to these, frankly, just to sort of get an idea of the situation and the scene at the time. So here we go. Here is the 911 call in this case.
Forsyth County 911. Hi, yes. I need an ambulance and a police to my home.
What's the address?
4450 Woodlet Court.
4450 Woodlake?
Woodlet.
Woodlet, okay. All right, 4450 Woodlet Court. What is your name?
My name is John Myers, Jeanne.
Okay, and your phone number is 609.
Yes.
Okay, what's going on?
We had people over last night. We were drinking. Most of us went to bed. One of them stayed on the balcony. She was drinking, and we just went outside, and she's laying face down in the backyard. It looks like, I'm guessing maybe she fell off the balcony, but she's stiff.
Okay, is she breathing?
I don't know if she's face down.
Okay, how old is she?
41. Here, hold on.
Hey, this is Jose Barrera.
Hey, have y'all checked to see if she's breathing?
She's not moving one bit. She's not breathing.
Okay.
I just try to assess her, touch her. She's completely face down in the yard. She is stiff.
Okay. Do you know if she, do you see any blood or anything where she, are you there?
I am.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I was outside.
It's okay. I'm not sure what happened to the line there for a second. Do you see any blood or anything to where, from where she fell?
I don't know if I should move her over. I mean, she is completely face down.
Okay. I mean, can you just check and see if she's breathing? If she's not breathing and you know she's gone, then just leave her where she's at. If she, okay.
1 minute. I'm completely not sure.
Okay, and that's the only blood that you would see?
That's what I can see without moving her over. I haven't seen her face.
Do you know if she was suicidal at all?
I have no clue. I've met her one other time. You know, like my girlfriend said, people were over last night. She was her birthday party. We're not the woman that we believe to be deceased, but it's my girlfriend's birthday party. Instead of having everybody go out, she had everyone stay in. And she was the last one I saw before everybody was typically put off to bed. She was the last one in the kitchen. She was just either waiting around for a ride or waiting until the morning.
Okay. How far is the where she would have fell from? How far is the deck from the ground?
I would probably say maybe 20 feet.
Okay.
You know, 20 feet from where your feet would be on the railing. The railing itself is maybe 3.5, 4 feet.
Okay. And what is her name?
I know her name, we call her Tam. I'm assuming that's short for Tammy or Tamla.
Was she there with anyone else?
Her name is Tam Horsford, Horsford, so the black female. I don't believe anybody was. My girlfriend has cameras here on the back deck that we can check.
Okay.
That I think would have caught the incident if she fell from here. Again, I don't know. It's hard to say if she fell from the deck or if she was already downstairs. She was the only smoker here, and I'm sorry. That's a lot of information.
Okay, I'm so sorry about that. So you think she's possibly out there smoking?
Yeah, she was the only smoker. I mean, I'm on the back deck right now, and you know, cigarettes, lighter, that type of thing are out here.
Okay.
I'm just trying to see where on her wrist might have came from.
Okay. All right. Are all the people that were there last night, are they still at your house?
Okay. Okay, there are 4 people that were here last night that are no longer here.
Okay. And they just left this morning, or they leave last night?
Do you know roughly what time each of them left? Like, they completely went out on the city? We can check. I mean, she's got an alarm system that gives alerts when the doors are open on her phone.
Okay.
But I think the last time that I personally saw Tam was probably about 1 in the morning before I'd gone upstairs to bed.
Okay.
And at that point, she was the only one in the kitchen. I know.
Okay. Let me see where everybody is. I have one deputy that's about to pull into your subdivision. So I'll stay on the phone with you just for a minute. Is this going to be around back? Is that the way he needs to go?
Right. So when he pulls up to the residence, there will be one car in the street, 4 in the driveway.
And does he need to come and go through the house, or does he need to walk around the back?
They can go around to the side. I'm going to grab my shoes, and then I'll direct them when they get here. No, it'll be easier for them because she's laying in the yard down, basically on the patio downstairs.
Okay. All right, I have one that should be pulling up. Do you see him outside?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'll let you go then.
All right, thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Bye.
So you guys just listened to that call, and it started out with John, who makes the call, but pretty soon after a few sentences, she passes the phone off to her boyfriend, Jose Barrera. And Barrera is the one, it sounds like he's conferring with other people for the answers. He's the one conveying the information, which, by the way, I'd note, may not be that unusual, because if he is a pretrial services officer, he is used to kind of these sorts of situations, knowing what, for example, a judge or 911 person wants to hear, can probably have experience in keeping cool in difficult situations. So just on a first glance, it's not strange to me that the person who has experience working in the courts is the one conveying most of the information. The thing that really stuck out to me is this was a very calm conversation across the board, from Barrera, Jean, the 911 person, and they're trained to be calm throughout this, but the cadence and the tone of everyone is actually pretty lackadaisical. That's why the call goes on for so long. There's no shuffling or dropping the phone or passing the phone among each other as they're trying to find out answers. It almost sounds like they are all pretty far from Tamla's body and are trying to look at it to give answers without anyone really wanting to go near her body. And so that's kind of my first blush, is that it was a very calm conversation. They may as well have been talking about the weather.
Yeah, there's none of this sort of, if you're somebody who thinks that a lot of emotion in a 911 call shows that somebody's making it up, well, there's none of that here. Now, I think there's a couple things. Number one, I guess Jean is her name. Sorry, I called her Jan earlier, Jean. But in any event, she starts the conversation. She hands it off to Jose, like Alice said. There are times where it sounds like someone is kind of crying in the background. I don't know if that's her or someone else, but it may just be that she was going to make the call and just realized she couldn't do this. A couple things. It seems like everybody was very sure from the very beginning that Tamla was definitely dead. I think at one point, John says that she's stiff, for instance. And I think when they saw her, they knew she was dead. Now, one reason that you could have the way that they sort of approach this, the very calm, it could be shock as well, that they're just shocked. They're just shocked that this is happening, and they're calling 911, and they are just relaying the information. Jose also has the advantage of working in the system. And look, if you work in the system, you see and know of really bad things all the time. And to some extent, you become a little desensitized to it. And you just approach these things differently from the average person. There aren't many police officers who are going to come upon a scene and lose their minds. And Jose is not a police officer, but he's seen a lot of bad stuff and he works in the system. So to me, I don't actually find their demeanor all that unusual. Like nothing about their demeanor screams to me something, they're covering something up or they're involved in this. I don't get a lot of that from the 911 call. Now, as we've said before, judge people based on a 911 call at your own peril. I'm sure there are a lot of people who listen to this and think they're way too calm, and they must have had something to do with it. And they spent the whole night getting ready for this call, and that's why they're able to do that. And I'm interested to hear what people think. The way I hear it, I kind of hear just what a couple people in shock who've just discovered a body in the backyard that is completely inexplicable to them must think's going on. There's one part that kind of drops out in the call about there's blood on one of Tamla's wrists, and Jose at one point is like, I don't know if she cut her wrist or what. As we'll discuss in the autopsy, it turns out the wrist is broken, and there's actually sort of the bone is through the wrist, and so that's why it's bleeding. So there's sort of this initial discussion of, was she suicidal or not? Nobody thinks she's suicidal at this point. There's no allegation of suicide. I don't think anybody thinks suicide is involved in this. If she, or however she died, I think most people think it was an accident. So, that's the 911 call. Like I said, I'm interested to hear what people think. There was nothing that really jumped out to me in it. I don't know if there's any particular part that needs to be focused on. Alice, was there anything in particular other than what you've already mentioned that you wanted to discuss?
The only thing that really jumped out at me was the description of a stiff body. That was the descriptor kind of that Barrera kept going back to as to how he knew she was certainly dead. Was she's stiff. That's interesting to me because that is true. Your body does start to go stiff pretty soon after life leaves it, if it's just left there. But it's interesting for maybe people who've never seen a dead body to immediately recognize that to be the case, especially if they haven't touched the body, to kind of recognize this. And if you were to touch the body, maybe it's the stiffness that jumps out at you at first. But also, we've heard people describe it as, but it's cold, cold to the touch, because that's so stark from a typical living, breathing body that's warm to the touch. There's no description of that. So I just thought that was interesting. It doesn't mean anything in particular. It's just a very stark way to describe a body that you don't hear that often. And to the eye, without kind of touching it, it's interesting that they can see that. And it could just be that she's in an awkward position and it's clear you're stiff because you would not naturally lay in that position.
And let me say this, just right here. This is a really interesting thing that Alice picks up on. Now, it's possible that it was just so obvious she was dead that they're conveying that because of that. But it's a good point. Stiff is a weird way to describe someone that you're looking at from a distance, right? And Jose at one point says something along the lines of, I don't know if I should move her or whatnot. And the lady's like, well, if you're sure she's dead, don't touch her. And Jose will say later that he never touched her. However, it's pretty clear someone did touch her because one of her arms is sort of up at an angle. And basically what most people think happened, and what Jose apparently told somebody did happen, was he actually did check her pulse. He went out there when they found her and he checked her pulse. And if he did that, that would explain the stiffness, because when he did that, he would have recognized immediately how stiff her body was, that she was clearly dead, that there was no pulse. And I think this is indicative of something that we're going to see. People are lying here. There's a lot of lies that we're going to see. It doesn't necessarily mean that there was a murder here. And I'm going to return you to one of our rules from all the way back in our first episode, that people lie, but that doesn't make them liars. There may be lies in this case, and I think there certainly are, that don't necessarily mean that Tamla was murdered, but I think this is one of them. I think the notion that no one touched her is kind of a white lie, that they didn't want to admit they had touched her once they were told, oh, you shouldn't touch her. And they were like, well, shoot, we already touched her. And they didn't want to say it. I think that is one of the things that happened. And I think Alice puts her finger on it. They knew she was stiff because someone had touched her and felt that.
Now, another very interesting thing that Jose mentioned in that call was that there were cameras. There were cameras, and he kind of noted that it didn't seem like anyone had looked at the cameras yet, because he said, well, there are cameras, so if she fell or from the patio, that should have caught it, or if someone was out there with her, should have caught it. So the expectation was that these cameras probably caught what happened and we would know what happened. But here's the strange thing. They didn't catch what happened because the batteries were dead. Some have suggested this is awfully convenient and that the police never fully looked into it. But if the cameras worked and recorded a murder that everyone at the house knew about, would you mention the cameras on a 911 call? You'd probably just not talk about cameras at all, so no one even thinks to look for cameras. And if you did, wouldn't you delete whatever was on them anyway before the police got to them? So I think what we're trying to say is, even though you can have lots of conspiracy theories about how convenient the cameras were not working at the time, I think likely whatever happened, the cameras probably just didn't work. They probably didn't run out the batteries. I will say, I don't know what kind of cameras, like if they are batteries so that they're unwired, or if they're chargeable batteries, or they're plugged in. It's probably not plugged in because then the batteries wouldn't be dead. But I have, like, you have to charge the cameras and they run by wireless internet. They are always dead. Like, every time I leave town, I'm like, I should charge these, and I never do because I always forget. And furthermore, I wouldn't know how to run down the batteries or know how to find if they were just like AA batteries. I wouldn't know how to find dead batteries to be able to replace them in order to throw the police off the scent. So I think kind of Occam's razor here, the cameras probably just didn't work. And Cumming is a nice suburb. There's really not that much crime, especially not in someone's fenced-in backyard in the suburbs. And so it's very likely that they had cameras, but they never really used them. There wasn't really a need to use them, so they probably didn't think about checking the batteries.
Yeah, and what Alice means by that, any criminals who are listening, is that she always charges her batteries. And if you go to her house, you will be caught. So that's what she meant. But no, I can totally.
Just kidding, everyone. I'm super well armed.
I can totally imagine doing this. I would totally do something like this. Buy the cameras, put the batteries in, and then never check it again. And the one time I need it, the batteries are dead. Like, I can just totally imagine this. And it's one of those things where, not to give it all away, but if anybody killed Tamla, it's probably Jose, right? I mean, it's hard to imagine someone else throwing her off the balcony or pushing her off the balcony. I mean, I guess it's possible it was one of the other women. But I think most people, when they sort of cast blame about this case, they're casting it at Jose. But remember, he's the one who talks about the cameras. If you believe that Jose killed her and the cameras worked, that would be a really weird thing to do, to mention the cameras. And unless you knew for certain that the batteries are dead, which you probably wouldn't mention the cameras. It would just take a lot of foresight to think, well, I killed her, there are cameras, but the camera batteries are dead. So I'll mention the cameras because that'll make it seem like I really wanted to figure this out. But then when they look, the batteries are dead. And I just don't know that you would come up with that sort of on the fly. I think more likely you just wouldn't mention the cameras. And people who think, well, how do we know the batteries were dead? They should have looked. If he mentioned the cameras, then the batteries were dead, whether he was involved or not. There's just no way he would have mentioned the cameras and they worked and then like never got rid of the footage or anything and just been like, phew, I'm glad the police never checked that. The batteries were dead. There's no camera footage of whatever happened. I think that's pretty clear here. And it's just one of those things that's unfortunate that there was nothing that captured this. So let's talk about the police report, and then we'll probably wrap it up for today. So the first officer to arrive on the scene found Tamla in the backyard wearing her pajamas. Her left arm was up while her right arm was down by her side. And it's this left arm that was up that a lot of people think the reason it was up and not beside her side was because it was the arm that someone checked her pulse using. And if I recall, I think the aunt, her initial statement is that both her arms were down by her side. So between when the aunt sees her and when the police arrive, one of her arms is up. And obviously that wasn't Tamla, because at this point she would have been dead for quite some time. So the officer noted in his report that there was that wooden deck that was above where Tamla lay. He actually measured the distance to be about 15 feet from the deck to the ground. The rail itself around the deck was about 3 feet high, so pretty high, but not so high that you couldn't imagine somebody possibly going over it. Now, interestingly, the officer also noted that on the ground level, there was a divider between this sort of, you got to imagine, we mentioned this a little bit earlier, but you've got this deck, and then below it, you have sort of this patio, and then there's like a gravel sort of space, right, between the patio and where the mulch and the grass are. And then you have this divider that separates the gravel from the grass. And it's basically a little metal divider that comes up about 1 inch above the ground. And it was very close to Tamla's feet. And police noted that it was actually consistent with some cuts on Tamla's shins, though it's unclear how it could have done that damage if she fell from the elevated deck. So what I'm saying here is there's some cuts on her shins, some cuts on her legs, lower legs, that almost seem like they could have come from her maybe tripping over that little raised metal part and falling onto the ground. And that's why this first officer, his initial thought was not that she had fallen from the balcony. It was that somehow she had tripped over this metal divider, fallen face down, and when she did that, whatever happened. And you might think, that's crazy. You couldn't die from that kind of fall. But you can. I mean, if you fall just the right way, and let's say you're drunk enough that you don't really brace yourself, then you could imagine that. But as we're going to talk about next week, when you look at the autopsy, you realize that's not possible. It's not possible for her to have fallen from that place straight down and had the injury she had. It had to be something else. And that already raises a mystery. If that's true, then how did these wounds on her shin come about? How did she get those if it's impossible for her to have fallen from the upper area and hit her legs on that? Now, it's possible they come from something else and that this is just sort of a red herring and we shouldn't even be talking about it. But nevertheless, it is pretty interesting to think about.
Yeah, we're just starting to get into it. It's just starting to really get interesting, because up until now, I think we had a story that, like Brett said, we may never have really heard about because there was nothing particularly interesting, but there are some really interesting nuggets that we've started to touch on and we're about to get into. And we will save it for next week, not on purpose. I'm always like, sure, we can get through our whole outline for this episode, but I always underestimate our ability to talk forever.
Well, as I always say, I think all these cases are worth giving them whatever they need to be given. And this is one that deserves a little bit of analysis. And the things that we're going to talk about next week really deserve some analysis. So we're not going to rush through them. And the things we're going to talk about are some of the things that make you think it's an accident and some of the things that make you think it is a murder. And then we're going to come to a conclusion about what we think happened here and whether or not this was a murder or not. And for those of you who didn't like that we sort of hedged our bets on Ellen Greenberg, which I stand by because I don't know how you can be sure exactly what happened there, and I look forward to the rest of the investigation, I at least will come to a firm conclusion about exactly what I think happened here next week.
Well, this has been really interesting. I find this fascinating, especially because this happened in my dad's town, and it feels very, very close to home for me. And we'd love to hear y'all's theories of what you've heard about the case and what you think happened and what you think about that 911 call. I know we don't always put a lot of stock in the call, and I think that's right. I think it's important to listen to, the calls, just as it is important to read the police reports because they are all part of the case file, but everyone kind of interprets them differently. So that's why we played it for you here, and interested to hear what you guys have to say about it.
Yeah, I know this is a case that spurs a lot of strong feelings, so I can't wait to see that. And as Alice said, I hope you guys will let us know. Shoot us an email, prosecutorspod@gmail.com, @prosecutorspod for all your social media. Join us on the gallery on Facebook. Really lengthy conversations about every case we talk about on there. And I always feel like I learned something on there. So if you want to debate this, that is really the best place to do it. And I hope you will join us. We also have a Reddit subthread, which is also interesting, but a little less active than the gallery. And obviously, if you want to join Patreon and get all these episodes early and ad-free and discuss them with your fellow patrons, we would love to have you. Want to thank everyone who has left a review, who's told a friend. You guys are the reason we're able to keep doing this, because you keep telling people about the show. If you haven't left a review, I hope you'll do it. You know, the two places I know you can leave reviews are Apple and Spotify. So take a moment to do that, as long as it's going to be 5-star. Otherwise, maybe don't. But
if you're going to be a 1-star, at least be original and don't complain about our banter or the music. If you can be unique about your 1-star, then we will welcome it with open arms.
And we'll share it on Twitter so everybody can enjoy it together. But I think that's all I've got, Alice. Anything else you want to add before we sign off?
No, this has been really fun. I've missed recording with you, Brett. Thank you guys, as always, for listening to this podcast and also our Legal Briefs podcast. We love getting to do 2 shows for you every week. And yeah, I look forward to next week.
And next week, we will wrap this up. I promise you, this is going to be 2 episodes. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the prosecutors.
How are y'all feeling today?
Better. You know, just...
I know.
That's what it is.
It's the worst. A stomach bug is the worst.
I mean, the kids are fully recovered because you know how it is. They bounce back so fast.
I'm glad. Something about evolution.
Yeah, something about it.
I guess we are like past evolutionary benefit.
Exactly.
Where they're like, you know what? If you died off, we'd be fine. These kids, they're the future.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
So, you know, I said Yan with a J. So is her name Jan? Is that what I'm going for there? It's not Jean. Jan. I think it's Jan.
So you guys just listened to that call, and it started out with Jan, who, is it John? John, I guess is how she pronounces her name. Yeah.
John.
French? Okay.
Halloween with Pluto TV's 31 Nights of Horror. All month long, Pluto TV is bringing you the best Halloween movies, shows, and more. Watch classic horror movies like The Grudge or The Blair Witch Project, or scream along with your favorite stars like Ryan Reynolds in Life. Pluto TV has hundreds of channels with thousands more movies and TV shows. The best part, it's so free it's chilling. No credit card, no sign up, no fees. Download the Pluto TV app on all your favorite devices and start screaming now.